Hi everyone, welcome to the final lesson of this course. I'm sure this is the one you are looking forward to the most. We're now going to apply everything we've learned to paint a black and white portrait. It's really fun to paint a portrait when you know all the tips and tricks I've shared with you, as you'll be surprised at how great the result can be. So let's get to it. Just as we did for the sphere, we'll choose a neutral grey for the background so we can clearly identify our lighting and shading. We'll start to sketch on a new layer. Remember to always name your layers appropriately to have a tidier workspace. However, for this exercise, we're only going to use one layer as we'll be working constantly on the same hues and we don't need to separate any elements as we would if our illustration were made up of line art and flat colours. The brush I'm going to use for the portrait is the same one I used for the sphere. It's a rectangular painterly style brush. The effect of this brush on realistic designs is fantastic. Have a look at the properties it has in the settings and modify your own brushes if you want to obtain a similar stroke. Start to sketch your drawing with a photo as a reference. In this case, I'm not looking to create an exact copy of the portrait. I'm using my own style, almost like a caricature. For that reason, I'm not too worried about respecting the space between the elements. What I do want to pay attention to are the direction of those elements and the approximate differences in size. When I draw the features, I can exaggerate, but I do have to respect the shape of these and of her face, otherwise it won't look like her. If you wanted to create a realistic portrait and copy her face precisely, you would have to use techniques or tools like measuring sticks to measure the distance between the elements. Basically, a very realistic portrait needs a meticulous process of observation and precision. In this exercise, we're going to focus mainly on the study of light and shadow, so the realism of our drawing is not so important. It's much easier to use your own style. Now we have the sketch, we're going to start our study of the light. To do this, we need to roughly define the block where the main shadow is. So squint and observe the photo. You'll see that there's an area of defined shadow. Draw this area on your portrait and fill it evenly. The effect is immediate. See how it works? So our main area of shadow is defined. Now, as you see, I'm erasing some volume from the hair. With the shading, I can adjust the areas that I'm not too sure about. And you can modify and adjust as you go along. Now I have the base for the shading. I can start adding some intensity in those areas that are clearly darker. You can see this in the hair or the shirt, for example. However, if you squint again, you'll notice that the shadows of the skin blend with those of the hair and the shirt. It's important to do this without the fear of losing the shapes. You won't lose them. Bit by bit, we'll add more hues, but first the base really needs to work. If you see areas in the light that are just as dark as the shade, remember that these areas can never compete with any reflection we apply later. Now that you more or less have the shadows in place, roughly paint in the light that proceeds directly from the light source. Remember the light source? You always need to establish this right at the beginning. As we're working from a photo, the light source is already given to us. As you see, it comes from the top right-hand corner. So although the light source is a given, you should get used to locating it at the beginning so you don't make up any areas of light or shadow. Remember that your eyes can play tricks on you. Eyes usually have a powerful shine, and so we'll probably find very strong lights. However, we can also find areas of shadow, like here in the left eye, and you'll have to apply the principles of light and shadow. Even though we think we're seeing a pure white here, it isn't. Think about the rules we're learning and always remember to squint when you're unsure about something. the end of the area that defines the shadows of the volumes is the terminator. This is the darkest part where there is practically no reflection. Mark this correctly in your drawing. As you can see, I can see it clearly on the arm and the face, but smaller elements and volumes also have it. Observe the photo carefully and you'll find it. That being said, don't overdo it or the line will be too abrupt. These blocks of shadows represent a different plane in the volume of the shape. As we saw on the cube in the theory lesson, each face means a considerable change in tone. So our face is the same every time we see these cuts, we're looking at a different plane. So when we apply shadow, we're creating the volume of the object. A good tip to get good results when shaping an object digitally is to use the sketch line to curve the shadow. Select the tones with the eyedropper and with a low opacity brush, curve that shadow lightly towards the inside, and the result is very convincing. Remember all the elements of light and shadow on our sphere? Imagine that we reduce our face to simple volumes. We would find an infinite number of geometric shapes. Well, each of those works pretty much like the sphere. That's why we have to follow the steps that we did with the sphere, not just on the face in general, but all of the small volumes too. Obviously, they're not all going to receive the same amount of light. The light loses its intensity the further away it is from the object. As the drawing is in our own style, we can allow ourselves some artistic license when applying the light and shading. For example, we could intensify areas of shadow or light to give contrast to our drawing. This could look nice, but do it with caution. Know exactly what it is you want to achieve. Any license you allow yourself must be a product of knowledge, not of errors. You need to be in control of your drawing. If you feel confused or you're not sure where you went wrong, just flip your drawing. Flipping the drawing horizontally, you'll realize there may be more mistakes than you thought, as the eyes get used to a certain perspective when this hasn't changed for a while. So correct what you need. Another option is to use a mirror and observe your drawing through this. The results are surprising and you can see things that you wouldn't have even thought of. Also, you could ask someone else to tell you what they see wrong in the drawing. In my experience, I've noticed that even people who have no artistic knowledge observe mistakes in my drawing that I was unable to see, just because they're bringing a fresh pair of eyes. Paint in the small details that make up the face. If you want more realism, you do have to invest more time. Although don't think that the level of realism necessarily depends on these details. Earlier, we mentioned Goya. His paintings had a very realistic style, but he hardly detailed them at all. He achieved the realistic appearance by correctly capturing the geometric shapes and volumes of the models. We can also achieve this by precisely measuring the distance between the elements. If the basic shapes work, then the rest just comes. Get good results from your base first, invest more time in the details later. I didn't want to add many details to the hair simply because I like this style in my designs. I think by making the face stand out, the figure stands out as the central object and the eye understands everything else quickly without having to explain it perfectly. You can try this technique if you want, or you could add some more detail, it's up to you. But it's always interesting to play around with the elements, making some more detailed or intense than others, so the spectator's gaze goes where you want it to. As this is a portrait and the face is our main focus, I don't think I need the hands. But I'm going to erase them carefully so the strokes look nice. If you wanted to keep the hands, you would just apply the same process as with the rest of the drawing. But I think this is enough to complete a study of light and shading. Finally, I'm going to intensify the light on the face without observing the photo, just to add some richness to the design. I'll go to the lightest areas and add small points of intense light. Remember not to overdo it, as you don't want the lights to be unbalanced regarding the shading. And our portrait is finished. The learning process was a little long, but the result is always satisfying. Practice lots of portraits and you'll soon become a great artist. I really hope you enjoyed the course and that you found it useful. I'll see you next time. Bye!